It was just another quiet morning on a remote farm, but that all changed when a group of thugs rolled up, intent on causing chaos. They spotted an old, rusty tractor sitting in the yard, an easy target for their vandalism. But what they didn't know was that the man who owned it wasn't just any farmer. He was a legend, one of the deadliest combat instructors in the country, someone whose training had shaped the toughest warriors. As the thugs wreaked havoc, they were unaware that their target wasn't helpless. Instead, the old man's calm demeanor hid years of skill and experience that would soon turn the tables in the most unexpected way. As tensions rise, the situation takes a deadly turn. Will the thugs realize their mistake before it's too late? Stay tuned as we reveal the real power behind that old tractor. The old farmer, known to the few who respected him as Master Grant, had spent decades out of the spotlight. Once a highly decorated combat instructor, he had retired to the farm to live a quiet life, far away from the chaos he once thrived in. His reputation, though, was legendary in certain circles. Few knew the true extent of his skills that had kept him alive through countless dangerous missions, and that made him a master of unorthodox tactics. The thugs didn't care about any of that. They were more interested in their usual brand of destruction, breaking things, stealing what they could, and leaving destruction in their wake. But when they started defacing the tractor, something triggered inside Master Grant. His body moved without thinking, and a cold fire ignited in his eyes. As they laughed and joked about their easy target, they had no idea what was coming next. The tension thickened in the air. One wrong move, and things would escalate quickly. As the thugs continued their reckless vandalism, one of them, a lanky man with tattoos running up both arms, kicked the tractor's wheel, mocking the old machine. "This thing's barely holding together," he sneered, "just like its owner." His friends laughed, not realizing that their words were more than just insults. They were provoking something far more dangerous than they could understand. Grant's hands clenched into fists, but he stayed still. His years of training had taught him that patience was as powerful as action. He'd survived worse threats, but this was personal. The farm was his sanctuary, and these punks had crossed a line. The more they taunted, the more his instincts sharpened. His eyes scanned the yard, taking in every detail: the rusted shovel near the barn, the broken fence post, the weathered wooden gate. Meanwhile, the thug's leader, a bulky man with a scar down his face, watched with a certain arrogance. He didn't fear the old man. He'd seen people like him before, just fragile old folks who couldn't fight back. But something about Grant's silence made him uneasy, a gut feeling he couldn't shake. He motioned for one of the others to fetch a crowbar, his voice low. "Let's finish what we started. I don't like the way this is going." The crew closed in, thinking it would be another quick job, but they were about to learn a harsh lesson. Grant had already made his move. The game was changing. The leader's footsteps were heavy on the gravel as he approached Grant, crowbar in hand, the metal gleaming in the weak morning sun. The others followed, closing in from different angles, their faces twisted with mischief and malice. But with every step they took, Grant's body tensed, his breath steady, his eyes narrowing. His years of combat had taught him that every situation had a rhythm, a moment where the world slowed down. This was that moment. He could feel it, the air thickening, the ground beneath his boots steady and firm. The bulky thug raised the crowbar, swinging it toward the tractor, but Grant was already there, his movements a blur. With a swift motion, he grabbed the weapon midair, twisting it out of the thug's grasp with a single effortless flick. The thug's eyes went wide, confusion replacing his arrogance. Before he could react, Grant's hand shot out, grabbing him by the collar and pulling him close. "Wrong move," Grant muttered under his breath, his voice low but clear. The other thugs froze, unsure of what to do. The leader stumbled back, eyeing the old man now with a mixture of fear and disbelief. How had he moved so fast? They had underestimated him, but there was no turning back now. One of the thugs lunged forward, a pocket knife gleaming in his hand, but Grant was already on him, a blur of precision and speed. In one fluid motion, he disarmed the attacker, spinning him around and pinning him to the ground. The remaining thugs looked to each other, the situation quickly spiraling out of control. They had come to intimidate, to destroy, but now they were the ones on edge, each one silently. The remaining thugs looked to each other, the situation quickly spiraling out of control. They had come to intimidate, to destroy, but now they were the ones on edge, each one silently wondering just how much more they could push before it all turned fatal. The tension hung heavy in the air, the silence between each movement screaming louder than any noise could. Grant, standing tall and unwavering, didn't give them an inch. He wasn't just protecting his farm anymore, he was showing them the deadly mistake they had made. But with every second that passed, the situation grew more volatile. Would the thugs back down, or would they push too far and force him to take it all the way? The farm was quiet, but the storm was about to break. Just as it seemed like Grant had the situation under control, a distant sound broke the silence, a low hum that grew louder by the second. The thugs, still trying to regain their footing, exchanged nervous glances, but Grant didn't flinch. His instincts told him something was off. The hum was no ordinary noise. It was the unmistakable sound of an engine. A truck, and not just any truck. The rumble of it echoed through the yard, coming in fast. Grant's eyes darted toward the dirt road leading to the farm, and his gut clenched. His first thought was that it was more of them, more thugs, reinforcements sent to finish the job. But then the truck came into view, and he saw the emblem on the door, a badge, familiar and chilling. It was the symbol of a private security firm, the kind hired by dangerous people to handle problems discreetly. The truck screeched to a halt just past the front gate, and two men in black tactical gear stepped out. They weren't just thugs, they were mercenaries, highly trained and heavily armed. And they weren't here to negotiate. The sight of them sent a shock through Grant's body. These men weren't part of the group of punks, and they definitely weren't expecting to find him here. One of the mercenaries, a tall man with a shaved head, scanned the scene, his eyes narrowing as he took in the chaos. He didn't seem surprised by the thugs' defeat, but more irritated that they hadn't handled it already. "You're late," Grant said, his voice steady, but there was no mistaking the tension in it. The mercenary smirked, stepping forward. "We weren't here for them," he said, his tone cold and detached. "We're here for you." The thugs, still on the ground and unsure of what to make of the new arrivals, looked at each other, bewildered. They'd come to cause a little trouble, not get caught in the middle of something much bigger. Grant, however, recognized the situation for what it was. His past was coming back, and this time it wasn't just a fight for his farm. These men weren't interested in a tractor or an old farmer. They were here for something much more dangerous. The stakes had just been raised, and now there was no turning back. The real fight had begun. The mercenary with the shaved head took a step closer, his hand resting on the pistol at his side. "You don't want to make this harder than it needs to be, old man. We're just here to tie up loose ends." The words hung in the air like a threat, but Grant's calm never wavered. His mind was already working, calculating his options, feeling the familiar rush of adrenaline. Before the mercenary could take another step, Grant moved. His body was like a coiled spring, snapping into action with a speed that left the thugs and even the mercenaries wide-eyed. In a blur of motion, he grabbed a rusty pitchfork from the nearby barn and lunged, using the long handle to knock the mercenary's pistol out of his hand. The man staggered back in shock, but Grant didn't stop. He swung the pitchfork again, knocking the second mercenary off his feet before he could react. The fight had shifted again, but this time, Grant wasn't just defending himself, he was taking control. The thugs, who had been watching in stunned silence, hesitated. They had never seen anything like this, and fear was starting to creep in. The leader of the group, now visibly shaken, glanced between the mercenaries and Grant, unsure of his next move. He'd wanted to scare the old man, but now the situation was spiraling out of control. Grant turned to face the mercenaries, his eyes hard. You think you can just walk in here and take me down? You've got no idea what you're dealing with. He tossed the pitchfork aside, his hands flexing as he prepared for whatever was coming next. The first mercenary, regaining his composure, reached for a knife at his belt, but it was too late. Grant closed the distance between them in seconds, twisting the mercenary's arm behind his back with a move so swift it seemed almost effortless. The man grunted in pain, but Grant didn't stop. He slammed the mercenary into the ground, disarming him with a flick of his wrist.